guys, we have a sleepy baby for the moment, so we're gonna take the win for now. Take the win for now. Who knows how long it will last, but whatever, just roll with it, right? You just roll on through with what you got. I am pinning this because I am hoping that if more people get it, they'll make one in blue, because my nephew wants it in blue for his birthday party. Good morning, Liz. How are you feeling? And I need them to make it in blue so that he can have it for his birthday. That is what we need. That is what we are hoping for. I don't know what's going to happen, but we will see. Baby girl is asleep for the moment, so cross your fingers, hey Amanda, that she stays asleep for book club. I am tired, as you can see from the giant circles under my eyes. But you know, it is what it is, right? Oh, it's a balloon. I was like, what am I hearing? It's the air blowing on a balloon. I'm gonna go fix that. We did not have the opportunity to read yesterday because, you know. Hey, Lorenzo, how are you? I hope all is well with you. Okay. Yeah, we read like one page yesterday, so we're going to reread that today because it's yesterday. I'm so tired that I went to put the milk away before putting any in my husband's coffee. Your girl is T-I-R-E-D, guys. Is anyone doing anything interesting this weekend? We're gonna go down and see my mom and my sister and the kids, so that'll be fun for everybody, you know. Fun. We're getting settled officially. It's my mom's birthday tomorrow, so I'm like, oh, that's cool. Dad leaves tomorrow, that's also cool. Yes. All good things. I'm just cleaning my glasses like the old lady I am. I had the realization recently that my son will never know me without glasses. My daughter got a couple of months of me without glasses, but my son will never have that experience. Not like I wear them all day, but like, you know, every time he sees mom reading, he will see mom reading with glasses, whereas she had a few months of mom reading without glasses. We're driving because you guys don't see me wear them because you don't see me driving, but I do have a pair. They have me wear glasses to drive, especially at night, because whatever. You know how it is to be old. Oh, to be old. Oh yeah, delightful. It took me 30 years to fix my stitches. 30 years of progressive glasses, and I can't craft without taking them. I can craft without taking off. Oh, that's exciting. I think I need that because, like, yeah, I think I need that. All right, she is still asleep, which is a huge win. She needs it, obviously, and we need it, obviously. Okay. I mean, there's obviously people who always have glasses, like my mother and my husband. They've had glasses since like they were children, you know. So it's different. And who knows? My kids may also need glasses. It doesn't matter. It's delightful. Okay. Her having her own room still feels weird. It does feel weird, but she loves it so much. She loves her room. So we are on chapter 6 today. Best looking copy. I've had glasses ever since 2nd grade, almost legally blind. My mom was legally blind without her glasses until she got LASIK. Yeah, she was technically. It's true. From like kindergarten or something onward. My husband's not that bad, but he did have glasses starting in like 2nd grade also. But my mom had them earlier and hers is way worse. Yeah. It's crazy. She has some crazy stories about that from when she was younger. But anyway, chapter 6. Let's try to read this before someone, I don't want to mention any names. I got mine in kindergarten and I got LASIK as an adult. My mom's had LASIK twice, I think, which I think is crazy. I cannot imagine having a needle in your eyeball, but whatever. Here we go. Chapter 6. A necessary intervention. Tick, 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 tick. From the moment Bristol and Lucy returned from the northern mountains, Bristol hadn't left the globe beside her desk. The globe showed her what the world looked like from space, and she scanned every inch of the land and sea, desperate to spot something new or out of the ordinary. I waited too long for LASIK and too far nearsighted issues and would still need reading glasses. That sucks. It's not much better though. It's not a needle, it's just a laser. Yeah, I still can't do it. Not for me, Liz. I'm not doing it. Tick, 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 tick. Bristol knew the Temple of Knowledge was somewhere among the mountains, the valleys, the fields, and the oceans before her. She just didn't know where. Madame Weatherbury said that it wasn't a part of the known world, but what the heck did that mean? Was the temple in a secluded area that hadn't been explored yet, like Madame Weatherbury's cave? Or was it hidden from view by a powerful enchantment like Greenhouse Canyon? Or maybe it was in plain sight but disguised to look like something else, like the Justice's secret room at the Chariot Hills Library. Tick, 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 tick. As her pocket watch constantly reminded her, the only thing that Bristol knew for certain was that she was running out of time to find it. While Bristol searched the globe, she named off locations where she thought the Temple of Knowledge might be hiding, and Pip took notes on a pad of paper. Oh, Susan, we're still only on the page we read yesterday, and you were here for that, so you're fine. We literally are like half a page in, and you were here for that yesterday. I'm just rereading the page from yesterday, so you're fine. No stress. It's at the part where Pip's taking notes, just like, you know. Yeah, literally nothing. You missed nothing. Okay, so the western shore is filled with sea coves. It could be in one of those, she said. Also, we should do an aerial search of the northern mountains, the eastern volcanoes, and the southern foothills, just in case there's something peculiar that I've never noticed in the past. And let's also write to our allies in the dwarf, troll, elf, and goblin territories and ask if they've discovered anything unusual. For all we know, the Temple of Knowledge could be at the back end of an abandoned dwarf mine or at the bottom of a goblin colony. And when the fairies return, we'll divide these areas and we'll start looking. Copy that, Pip said. I'll start writing to our allies. And while Bristol and Pip worked on locating the Temple of Knowledge, Lucy intensified the witch's search for the immortal with Madame Weatherberry's suggestions. She walked among the witches' workstations, barking out orders like an army general. All right, witches, it's time to hoist up our stockings, grease up our cauldrons, and put our double-double toil and trouble into double-double overdrive, Lucy said. We are to cease Operation Death and Dames immediately. I repeat, we are to cease Operation Death and Dames immediately. Obituaries and old ladies are a dead end. No pun intended. Sir, yes, sir, the witches said, and they saluted her. Bibi, I want you to reach out to the elders of every village and every kingdom. Ask them if they've ever met anyone recently that reminds them of someone that they met when they were much younger. Sprout, I want you to get your hands on the property records of every major city. Keep an eye out for any names that pop up more than once, especially over a long duration of time. And Stitches, I want you to write to all the major antique stores and ask them about their oldest pieces, and the names of the people who sold them. Sir, yes, sir, the witches said, and they scattered across the office to begin their assignments. Bristol felt a spark of guilt beginning to grow in the pit of her stomach. She appreciated Lucy's and the witches' devotion more than words can describe, but she couldn't bring herself to tell them it was a waste of time. They worked so diligently. Part of Bristol began to worry that the witches would discover the immortal. She couldn't imagine how disappointed her friends would be when they realized this was all for nothing. Don't worry, Bristol. We're gonna find this broad, Lucy said with a confident nod. Oh, I know you will, she replied, secretly hoping for the opposite. Bristol quickly glanced out the window so that Lucy didn't notice the guilt in her eyes. In the distance, at the very edge of the academy grounds, Bristol saw the hedge barrier begin to open. Emeralda was returning to the fairy territory, riding a unicorn into the property. Oh, Em and Xanthos are back from the Eastern Kingdom, Bristol announced to the others. Perfect timing, too. They might have an idea where the Temple of Knowledge is hidden. Lucy glanced out the window, too. That's funny. Xanthos isn't with her, she noted. And Bristol took a second look and realized that Emeralda was alone. Even more alarmingly, Emeralda was riding the unicorn across the grounds at an urgent pace. Other fairies throughout the property waved as she passed by, but Emeralda didn't acknowledge any of them. She hopped off the magical steed near the academy's front steps and ran inside as quickly as she could. Thank you. Hey, Tiffany, we're only about 2.5 pages in, so you're good. Bristol and Lucy looked at each other, thinking the exact same thing. It is the sunshine. I think it's too bright right here. I think you're right. Something's wrong, they said in unison. And a few moments later, the fairies and the witches could hear Emeralda rushing up the floating steps of the entrance hall. She charged through the office's double doors and slammed them shut behind her. Her eyes were wide with panic, and her coat and brimmed hat had been scorched, like she survived a terrible fire. Em, what happened to you? Bristol asked. Why isn't Xanthos with you? Oh, it's okay, Tiffany. You don't have to be sorry. At the mention of his name, Emeralda slid to the floor and burst into tears. It was shocking for the fairies and the witches to witness this. Emeralda had always been the most calm and collected among them. They couldn't remember the last time that Emeralda was even teary-eyed, but now she was sobbing hysterically. Bristol and Lucy helped her off the floor and sat her down on the glass sofa. I'm really sorry. It was just a really rough night, Emeralda sniffled. Em, what is going on? Where's Xanthos? Lucy pressed. I don't know, Emeralda cried. I tried to follow him, but he just kept running, and eventually it all became too strong. What became too strong? Bristol asked. The flames, they were everywhere. The fairies and the witches were confused, and they looked to one another for answers, but no one knew what Emeralda was talking about. You gotta take a deep breath and start from the beginning. Bristol waved her wand at the tea table and a glass of water appeared. Once Emeralda had a sip and took a few deep breaths, she was ready to explain. The Page-Turner bookstore was much bigger than we anticipated. We only had time to search through about a quarter of the books yesterday, so we decided to stay the night in Ironhand and start again in the morning. Xanthos and I found a cheap tavern down the street and booked 2 awful rooms in their basement. At some point in the middle of the night, I woke up to the sound of screaming, and Xanthos was yelling for help, so I ran to his suite, and when I got there, the whole room was on fire. But Xanthos hasn't lost control of his powers in years, Bristol said. I told him to make it stop, but he said the fire wasn't his, Emeralda said. At first, I thought that he was just embarrassed, you know, how hard Xanthos can be on himself, but as the night went on, I started to believe him. He was trying desperately to extinguish the fire, but it only grew stronger and stronger. I tried to trap the flames in his suite by turning the walls into diamonds, but the fire burned through it. The fire burned through diamond? Sprout asked. What did you do? BB asked. Well, Xanthos and I ran through the tavern and alerted the other guests, and by the time we got everyone outside, the tavern was a burning inferno. The floors began collapsing on one another. The fire was spreading into the buildings beside the tavern, and Emeralda shook her head in disbelief. Clearly, she was still trying to make sense of what she had seen. And what, Pip asked. It followed us into the streets, Emeralda recalled. I've never seen fire move like that before. There was nothing to burn in the street, and yet it moved directly toward us. Xanthos and I didn't know what to do, so we ran. And after the fire chased us, we ran, and the fire jumped from building to building on either side of us, and the buildings burned down in a matter of seconds. It was like it was hotter than a regular fire, and eventually we reached the Eastern River. Xanthos and I jumped in, but the current was strong, and we got separated. Xanthos made it to the other side before I did, but the river didn't stop the fire. The flames glided across the surface of the water to chase Xanthos into the eastern countryside. The fire burned across the water? Sprout gasped, and Emeralda nodded. I begged Xanthos to stop. I begged him to turn around and come back, but he kept running. By the time I climbed out of the river, the whole countryside was ablaze. Half the city had been destroyed, and, well, Xanthos was gone. The fairies and the witches were absolutely dumbfounded by Emeralda's dramatic story, and they could not form words. The office went so quiet that everyone could hear the watch ticking in Bristol's pocket. As if locating the Temple of Knowledge and finding the immortal weren't enough to overwhelm them, the news of Xanthos made their heads spin and their hearts ache. But where do you think he went? I have no idea. I've never seen him look so terrified. The whole time he kept shouting, "This isn't me, Em. You have to believe me."
Well, then what could it be? Who else could have created the fire like that?
Pip asked, and Bristol moved to the fireplace, staring up at the map of magic on the mantel. There were thousands of lights representing different fairies and witches throughout the world. It could take a couple of hours before they determined Xanthos' location. Change of plans, Bristol said. We're going to pause our search for the Temple of Knowledge and the Immortal and focus our efforts on Xanthos. The last time something like this happened, he was so ashamed that he almost drowned himself in a lake. We have to find him before he does something drastic. All the fairies and the witches nodded in agreement.
Well, I just have one question,
Stitches asked the room.
What?
Bristol asked.
Who the heck is that guy?
Stitches pointed to the back of the room, and everyone turned to look. To their surprise, a strange man had appeared out of thin air. He was short and stout and seated himself behind Bristol's glass desk. The man had a wide face and squinty eyes that were enlarged thanks to a pair of round glasses. He wore a long robe and a pointed cap made of a bronze fabric that was stitched with different mathematical symbols and equations.
Oh, forgive the intrusion, the man said in a cheerful tone. It's horribly rude to enter a place of business without making a proper appointment, but I promise my rudeness is warranted. I was going to notify you of my presence as soon as I arrived, but I didn't want to interrupt the young lady in the middle of her story.
Lucy crossed her arms and scowled at him.
Excuse me, did you need help finding the little boy's room or something? No, not to worry. I won't take your sarcastic remarks about my height personally, the man said with a friendly laugh. The run or make fun response is a perfectly normal reaction to the unexpected presence of a stranger. However, intentionally mean-spirited as your wit may be, choosing to disarm me with words rather than physical force is a sign of intelligence and self-confidence, although in my opinion there's nothing passive about the passive-aggressive.
The man got to his feet and hobbled out from behind the desk, using a bronze cane to help him walk. Bristol gripped her wand as he approached them. Who are you? She asked.
Splendid. We've already moved on to the questioning portion of our discussion, the man said. Since the mind processes information in a who, how, what, why, and when sequence, it's best to give information in that order, although I must admit you're handling my visit much better than your peers. This is the first time someone hasn't called for their guards or sicked the dogs on me.
Get to the point, shorty, Lucy exclaimed.
My name is Dr. States, he said with a quick bow. Pleasure to make your acquaintance. Bristol looked the curious man up and down. Are you a fairy or a warlock? Oh, how efficient. You've skipped the how and you're ready for the what, he said. While I'm indeed a member of the magical community, I'm neither a fairy nor a warlock. I'm an alchemist. An what? An alchemist, Dr. States sounded out for Lucy. It means I'm devoted steward of alchemy, the age-old practice of combining things with magic, with all things science. Bristol scrunched her forehead. I wasn't aware such a practice existed, she said. How does someone combine science with magic? Oh, it's a wonderful partnership, Dr. States was delighted to explain. Examining the wonders of science with the advantages of magic and the wonders of magic with the advantages of science helps the alchemist discover the secrets of our universe. You see, just like fairies and witches, every alchemist is born with a magical specialty, except our specialties have a scientific nature. Alchemists are the rarest members of the magical community, and once an alchemist is detected, they're brought to live at the Great Alchemy Institute, where their abilities can be put to great use. Bristol couldn't believe that there was a branch of magic that she wasn't aware of, and judged by the baffling faces around her, the others weren't familiar with alchemy either. Why haven't I heard of the Alchemy Institute before? Well, that's by design, Dr. State said. You see, the Alchemy Institute's been around for thousands of years. In ancient times, it was very well known and very well respected as an establishment. However, the more science advanced, the more humanity felt threatened by it. Breakthroughs in astronomy proved religious beliefs wrong, and, the origin of the world, so religious leaders declared science demonic as a practice. Breakthroughs in physiology proved that kings were no different from peasants who served them, so monarchs declared science was a treasonous act, and eventually the world began to hunt down scientists as ruthlessly as it hunted down the magical community. So the Institute relocated to a place where humanity could never find it. Alchemists have lived there ever since, secretly conducting experiments and studies that have deepened our understanding of the planet and the worlds beyond it. So, what are you doing here? Bristol asked. I see we've reached the why portion already. How resourceful of you, Dr. States said. In short, I'm here on very urgent business. You see, alchemists not only dedicate our lives to studying the wonders of the planet, but also here we are devoted protectors. To keep our research safe, we only interact with humanity when absolutely necessary, and as of last night, I'm afraid the world is in very serious danger. Lucy groaned and rolled her eyes. Let me guess, and for just 50 gold coins a day, you too can save the spotted platypus from going extinct. Look, buddy, maybe you missed the no soliciting sign on our front door, but we ain't buying whatever you're selling. Now, if you wouldn't mind showing yourself out, our friend is missing, and we'd really like to find him. Dr. States' friendly smile melted into a serious frown. Actually, your friend is the danger that I refer to. What does Xanthos have to do with this? Bristol asked. Perhaps we should all have a seat, the alchemist suggested. What I'm about to tell you may be difficult to hear. Dr. States gestured to the glass sofas, and the fairies and witches all had a seat. The alchemist tapped his cane on the floor, and a large armchair made from bronze leather appeared, and he sank into the chair and casually cleaned his glasses while he spoke. Now we have a major problem on our hands. As the young lady recalled, last night one of the biggest cities in the world was destroyed by a massive fire. As she suspected, this was no ordinary fire. Hey, Nikki. It was created by someone with extraordinary abilities, and it's not a coincidence that the young fairy with a specialty for fire was at the scene of the crime. The fire wasn't Xanthos' fault, Emeralda objected. I watched him try to extinguish it. He couldn't control it because it wasn't his magic. Young lady, I assure you, I have no ill will toward your friend, Dr. States said. A good scientist reviews all the facts before making a theory, and the facts are not in his favor. The Alchemy Institute has been observing Mr. Hayfield since his abilities surfaced. He has a long history of magical mishaps, to say the least. 2 years ago, we almost intervened after the death of his father. Mr. Hayfield started the largest brush fire in the Southern Kingdom's history. Fortunately, Madame Weatherbury found him and temporarily muted his abilities before anyone else was hurt. Unfortunately, last night, Mr. Hayfield proved once again that he's a danger to this planet. We believe Mr. Hayfield's abilities have outgrown his control and comprehension. As accidental as his actions may be, the threat still remains. If we don't stop him, mark my words, what happened last night in the Eastern Kingdom will be one of many catastrophes to come. So what are you planning to do then? Kill him? Lucy asked. The fairies and witches went tense with the idea, but the alchemist didn't deny the possibility. Oh, that will be decided by a vote, Dr. States said. Whenever a crisis of this magnitude occurs, alchemists turn to diplomacy for a solution. We invite the leaders of each independent nation to the Alchemy Institute for a gathering known as the Conference of Kings. There we discover the matter at hand and determine the best way to resolve it. Since the fairy godmother is your current leader, or king of the fairies, as the position was traditionally called, I have come to formally invite her to the next gathering. Everyone went quiet as they waited to see how Bristol would react to the invitation. Learning that there was a place like the Alchemy Institute, a place of experiments and education, normally would have thrilled her. But the more she thought about alchemists and their secrecy, the more angry Bristol became. Okay, explain one thing to me. If the alchemists are advanced as you say, then where were you when the magical community was being imprisoned and executed? Surely that's something that you could have helped with? Alchemists do not concern themselves with social and political affairs, Dr. States said. We find protecting people is a lost cause. Regimes come and go, laws change so frequently there's no point in stepping in, and as I said before, our priority is protecting the planet. Then where were you when the Snow Queen was attacking the North? Why didn't you step in and save the planet from her? Fires destroy, ice preserves, Dr. States said matter-of-factly. Life can survive a cold world, but it cannot survive a scorched one. If Xanthos' destruction spreads like we predict, the sky will fill with enough smoke and ash to block the sun, and then everything on Earth will perish. Bristol locked eyes with Dr. States for an intense moment. She found the alchemists' policies horribly selfish and inhumane. But if they weren't going to host a discussion that put Xanthos at risk, if they were going to host a discussion that put Xanthos at risk, she couldn't miss it. All right, when's the Conference of Kings? She asked. Tonight, Dr. States said. This evening at 5 o'clock sharp, we will send transportation to the Institute, and I highly recommend you join us so that your voice is heard. All right, I'll be there, Bristol said. Splendid, Dr. States said. Now that the Fairy King will be accounted for, there's still the question of who will be representing the witches. Bristol's position within the fairy community is obvious, but the witches have always been less organized than the fairies. Would one of you ladies tell me which witch is the Witch King? You mean one of us is invited to the gathering too? Stitches asked. To represent all the witches everywhere? Pip asked. Correct, the alchemist said. Why does it have to be a Witch King? Sprout asked. Couldn't there be a Witch Queen, or a Witch Empress, or a Witch Sovereign, or a Witch Ambassador, or... We get it, Sprout, BB said. Sexism is alive and well. Forgive the term, it's merely a formality, Dr. States said. If there's any confusion on who holds the title, perhaps it's best if you put it to a vote. The witches exchanged eager grins. In that case, I vote for Lucy, Stitches announced. That's a great idea. I vote for Lucy too, Sprout said. Me three, BB said. Me four, Pip added. Lucy jerked her head toward the witches. I can't be the Witch King. I don't even consider myself a full witch. I'm kind of magically fluid, honestly. Lucy, do it for Xanthos, Emeralda said. He'll need all the support he can get at the conference, and we should put his life in the hands of someone... we shouldn't put his hands in the life of someone like Stitches. We shouldn't put any life in the hands of Stitches, Pip said. Thank you, Stitches said with a proud smile. Lucy let out a reluctant sigh. Fine, she moaned. Well, butter my butt and smack a crown on it. It looks like I'm going to the gathering too. Marvelous, Dr. States said, and he got to his feet. Each leader is welcome to bring 2 guests to help them represent their territory. And remember, transportation to the Alchemy Institute will arrive at 5 o'clock sharp. We'll be looking forward to hosting both of you. The alchemist tapped his cane on the floor 2 times and vanished from the office. After his departure, the fairies and the witches sat in complete silence. It wasn't even noon, and the day had already been an emotional and mental triathlon. I feel like my mind has been drawn and quartered, Lucy said. First it was the Amora, then the Temple of Knowledge. Now we gotta worry about Xanthos and the Alchemy Institute too. Bristol began pacing and bit her lip as she thought it all over. Actually, the Alchemy Institute might be exactly what we need, she said. An educational facility that's hidden from humanity sounds awfully familiar, doesn't it? Lucy gasped. You think that the Institute is the Temple of Knowledge? Possibly. Even if it's not, maybe someone there knows how to find it. And suddenly the office doors swung open and Tangerine and Skyline stepped inside, returning from the Western Kingdom. The girls wore matching coonskin caps, and they carried taxidermied raccoons that were dressed, a taxidermied raccoon that was dressed in a glamorous ball gown. You two are not going to believe what happened. You are not going to believe what happened to us, Tangerina said with a laugh. The girls were eager to discuss their trip, but their friends were preoccupied, so Tangerine and Skyline's arrival wasn't met with the enthusiasm that they had expected. Why all the long faces? Skyline asked. Did something happen while we were gone? That's putting it lightly, Skyline. It's putting it lightly. All right, I saw a question, but I didn't understand it, so I need to reread it to see. How do you fix a slime that's actively evaded enough for you can play with it, but you wanted to be? You know what?
I'm not gonna lie to you, I have no idea what that means. So you're gonna have to ask your question a different way if you want me to be able to answer it, because I genuinely don't know what that means. But if you'd like to reword your question and ask again, I'll be happy to try. But I don't know what that means. I'm gonna take a sip of coffee before we continue. Delightful. How in the world do you read and 10 voices and read comments? I didn't read the full comment. I just like glanced on it and I was like, I don't really understand it. So I need to give it a better read. And when I gave it a better read, I still didn't understand it. So it wasn't the glance that was the problem. It was the comment, which is whatever it is. Okay. The next chapter is called Chapter 7, The Alchemy Institute. Here we go. And she's still fully asleep. She actually hasn't even moved from the position she was in. She was obviously very tired. At 4:55 that afternoon, the fairies and witches were standing on the front steps of the academy, eagerly waiting for the transportation to the Alchemy Institute. Bristol had asked Emeralda and Tangerina to help her represent the fairies at the Conference of Kings. After hours of constantly begging and bribing, Stitches and Sprout had finally convinced Lucy, against her better judgment, to take them as her guests, and so the Academy of Magic was left in the hands of Skylene, Phoebe, Pip, and Mrs. V. The fairies and witches' full attention was on the hedge barrier surrounding the fairy territory. At any moment they knew their ride to the Institute would appear, although they did not know what to expect. Not only were they curious about what was coming, they had no idea how it would get inside the property. 2 additional walls of emerald and fire had been added to the border as an extra protection from the army of the dead, so entering the grounds was not an easy task. Did Dr. States say how we'd get there? Tangerina asked. No, he didn't mention that part. Did he say where the Alchemy Institute is? Tangerina asked. He didn't mention that part either. For a man of science, he was pretty vague about the details. So let me get this straight, Tangerina said. A complete stranger shows up out of nowhere. He tells you that Xanthos is a danger to the planet, and he invites us to an undisclosed location for a conference that may or may not threaten Xanthos' life, and none of you asked any questions? The fairies and the witches shrugged with guilt. Listen, it had been a really long morning for us, Lucy said. Okay, I don't care where it is or how we get there. I'm just excited to go, Sprout said. I visited preschools, grade schools, middle schools, high schools, beauty schools, trade schools, performing schools, academies, colleges, universities, and grad schools, but this will be my very first institute. It won't be my first time around scientists, Stitches said proudly. I'm what they like to call a case study. Emeralda checked the emerald sundial around her wrist. Well, it's 5 o'clock on the dot, she said. Where are they? And as 5 o'clock turned into 5:01, the fairies and witches began to worry that there had been a miscommunication. However, the Academy of Magic was suddenly shaded by a quite quick eclipse, and the girls realized that they had been looking in the wrong direction. The fairies and witches gazed up and saw a floating carriage descending from the clouds at a rapid pace. The carriage was bronze with a large balloon attached to its roof. It was pulled through the sky by 4 enormous birds, and as the carriage swooped lower and lower to the ground, the fairies and the witches gasped that the birds were not living animals but machines. Instead of feathers, the birds were covered in small pieces of scrap metal, and instead of having muscles or ligaments, they moved thanks to a series of gears turning inside of their hollow bodies. Big golden keys stuck straight out of their backs as they were large wind-up toys. The carriage landed on the ground, ripping up chunks of grass upon impact, and the mechanical birds waddled toward the Academy's front steps. The coach was also operated by a number of turning gears and cogs, and when the carriage came to a complete stop, the doors opened on their own, and a chime announced its arrival. The fairies and the witches' mouths were agape as they observed the strange vehicle. What the heck is this? Lucy asked. I guess this is alchemy, Bristol said. Is alchemy safe? Tangerina asked. Well, it got here in one piece, Emeralda said with a shrug. I want to ride one of the birds, Stitches said. Me too, Sprout said.
The witches ran to the carriage and hopped on the backs of two metal birds at the very front. Meanwhile, Bristol, Lucy, Esmeralda, and Tangerina sat themselves inside the coach. Once they were seated, the doors closed behind them and another chime announced the carriage's departure. The mechanical birds raced forward and glided back into the sky. The takeoff was much more jarring than the fairies had expected, and they were almost thrown out of their seats. Stitches and Sprout cackled with excitement and urged the birds to go faster. Soon, the carriage was so high that the Academy of Magic disappeared below them. The birds flew south over the sparkling ocean and soared into the sea of fluffy white clouds. The further they traveled, the more inquisitive the fairies became about their destination. Even after an hour or so into the flight, there was no land in sight, and all they could see out the windows were clouds and ocean, and the birds never changed course. "Where do you think they're taking us? The South Pole?" Tangerina asked. "I didn't realize there even was anything this far south," Bristol said. The Alchemy Institute must be on a deserted island or something," Lucy said. Esmeralda gulped. "Guess again," she said as she pointed ahead, and everyone turned to the front window and their mouths dropped open again. Perched on the top of the clouds on the horizon was what looked like a small city. It was a city made of gold, silver, and bronze buildings that bobbed up and down as the clouds drifted through the sky. The buildings were connected by floating paths that continuously grew or shrank depending on how far the wind blew the structures apart. As the carriage flew closer, the fairies and the witches noticed that the buildings all resembled scientific tools. There were domes and roofs that looked like test tubes and flasks, towers that looked like gigantic telescopes, and microscopes and spires, poles that were equipped with spinning weather vanes and anemometers. Dozens of exhaust pipes let out fire, smoke, and steam, while several cranes and conveyor belts moved materials to and from different laboratories. And in the very center of the institute, placed on top of the tallest building, was a gigantic golden armillary. Oh, she might be blinking. Don't wake up, honey, don't wake up. Armillary sphere, clearly a proud symbol of the Institute's grand ingenuity. The fairies and witches were speechless as the carriage descended toward the Alchemy Institute's breathtaking campus. Bristol couldn't tell if she was more shocked that such a place existed or regretful that she hadn't seen it until now. She might be back asleep. We'll see. "This is remarkable," Bristol said with wide eyes. "Absolutely remarkable. Now I get why the alchemist is so secretive. If I lived in a place like this, I wouldn't want any visitors messing it up either." The carriage dived toward the long landing strip at the very front of the campus, and the vehicle came to a bumpy stop. As the fairies and witches stepped out of the coach and climbed off of the birds, they saw Dr. States waiting on the landing strip. He was accompanied by 12 other alchemists who stood in a tight row behind him. "Welcome to the Alchemy Institute," Dr. States said. "I hope you had a pleasant flight." There was so much to look at that the alchemist's friendly greeting was almost ignored. "Dr. States, this place is incredible," Bristol said breathlessly. "I've lived here since I was a child, and it never gets old," Dr. States said, and then turned to the alchemists behind him. "Allow me to introduce my colleagues. This is Dr. Strand, head of biology; Dr. Steam, head of chemistry; Dr. Stats, head of mathematics; Dr. Stent, head of physiology; Dr. Straight, head of geography; and Dr. Starr, head of astronomy; Dr. Stump, head of botany; Dr. Storm, head of meteorology; Dr. Stage, head of anthropology; Dr. Stone, head of geology; Dr. Stagg, head of zoology; and last but not least, Dr. Sting, head of entomology. All the alchemists were dressed in long robes and pointed caps made from gold, silver, and bronze fabrics. The only exception was Dr. Sting, head of entomology, who wore a hornet's nest on his head with actual hornets buzzing around it. And just like Dr. States, the other alchemists' wardrobes were embroidered with symbols and equations pertaining to their respective sciences. Unlike Dr. States, the majority of his colleagues were very young and attractive men. Some of them looked just a few years older than Bristol. Dr. Straight, head of geography, was the only young woman among the alchemists. Her short silver hair matched her robe, and she wore tiny compasses as earrings. After one glance at his hornets, Tangerina was immediately smitten with Dr. Sting. She strolled directly to the young alchemist's side with a playful bounce in her step. "Well, hello there, kind sir. I'm Tangerina Turkin. That's Miss Tangerina Turkin." She batted her eyes and offered Dr. Sting her hand. The alchemist was so fascinated by the bees flying in and out of her orange hair that he didn't even notice the gesture. "I've never seen an eusocial colony residing in a human hair before," Dr. Sting said. "May I take one of your bees for examination?" "Perhaps you could take me to lunch first," Tangerina said with a flirty wink. Emeralda cleared her throat. Tangerina, can you please remember what we're here for? Speaking of, where are the other representatives? Bristol asked. You're the first to arrive, Dr. States said. I'm guessing the others weren't as keen to board our mechanical carriages as you were. Human precautions can be so inconvenient when there's a schedule to be followed. I imagine we'll have some time to kill while we wait for the others to join us. Would you ladies like a tour of the Institute in the meantime? Absolutely, Stitches exclaimed. I thought you'd never ask, Sprout said, and the fairies and witches followed the alchemists up the winding path toward the campus. As they went, they passed through a giant gear that rotated the path like a spinning arch. The gear was engraved with a welcoming message. The Alchemy Institute, where exceptional innovation meets extraordinary imagination. For the first stop on the tour, Dr. States led the fairies and the witches into a bronze building in the center of the campus. The entrance was engraved with the formula E=mc² and opened into a very tall room with 4 white walls and no windows. As soon as the fairies and the witches stepped inside, they had to constantly duck and dive from several colorful objects hurling through the air. Thousands of bright red balls bounced from wall to wall, and hundreds of yellow yo-yos repeatedly dropped from the high ceiling and then rolled back upward, and a ton of small paper clips were compelled from corner to corner by different sized magnets. As Dr. States walked through the room, he miraculously avoided colliding with any of the moving objects, as if he was protected by a magical shield. The alchemist tapped his cane in the floor, and all the balls and yo-yos and paper clips froze in place. This is the physics department where we study the laws of motion, Dr. States said. Whether through gravity, propulsion, or magnetic charges, understanding why and how something moves is one of the most fundamental principles of science. Besides all the colorful objects, the room was filled with a very peculiar team of workers. A dozen short people with wide rectangular heads wandered around the department, taking notes and making measurements of the frozen balls, yo-yos, and paper clips. However, just like the birds that pulled the floating carriages, the workers were made entirely out of metal. They moved around the department thanks to gears spinning inside their hollow torsos and springs under their feet. Are those people? Bristol asked in awe. We call them magbots, short for magic robots, Dr. States explained. The magbots are a perfect example of alchemy at its finest. With some complex engineering and a dash of magic, we've created the perfect assistants to help us conduct our research. The magbots are motivated entirely by work, and they don't require food or sleep to function. Just a little oil and a light polish every now and then. You'll see many of them working throughout the Institute. The alchemist tapped his cane on the floor, and all the yo-yos, balls, and paperclips started whizzing around the room once more. After the tour of the physics department, Dr. Steam led the fairies and the witches to the chemistry department next door. The department was covered in long glass tubes that stretched and looped and zigzagged through the spacious laboratory. The girls became dizzy as they watched vibrant gases and chemicals moving throughout tubes at different speeds. The floor was tiled, and each square was labeled with an abbreviation like HE, TI, or CA. The girls noticed the tiles, and each contained a different solid, liquid, or gas below their feet. What's inside the tiles? Emeralda asked. Each tile holds an element of the periodic table, Dr. Steam said. Think of elements as like small bricks, and everything inside the known universe, from oxygen that we breathe to the rocks at the bottom of the oceans, made for a combination of these bricks. Ooh, what's that pretty one? Tangerina asked, and she pointed to an element that was more like a sparkle than a solid liquid or gas. That's MA. It stands for magic, Dr. Steve said. Magic is an element? Bristol asked. The alchemist nodded. Yeah, it's unlike any other element in the periodic table. Its atoms aren't made from traditional electrons, protons, and neutrons, but from a particle we call magtron. And the magtrons can turn into many electrons, protons, and neutrons as they wish, meaning that MA can transform into any element that it wants. We find MA in the blood of magical people and animals, but so far we haven't been able to recreate it. Lucy said, it's just like talent. Next, the fairies and witches were given a tour of the biology department. The girls were very surprised to see that the department was like a giant prison. 3 stories of prison cells were wrapped around a massive microscope, and each of the cells contained a very ugly and oddly shaped creature. Some of the creatures were round and squishy, others had long tails or thousands of wiggling hairs. Is this a monster jail? Stitches asked with a hopeful smile. It's a containment facility for magically magnified microorganisms, Dr. Strand said. Could you simplify that? Strand asked. Cells for cells, he clarified. It's much easier to examine microorganisms when they aren't so micro, so we make them bigger with magic. Most of these cells are human, some are animal, but we also have a few troublemakers like viruses and bacteria. The purple microorganism that looked like a giant sea urchin started growling at Lucy. What kind of microorganism is that? That's Carol, the common cold, Dr. Strand said. Stay away from her. She bites. After biology, Dr. Sting gave the girls a tour of the entomology department. 4 of the 5 walls contained colonies of ants, bees, termites, and wasps. The 5th wall was a giant canvas with thousands of exotic insects pinned to it. But the girls took a closer look and realized that the bugs weren't pinned. They had just been trained to sit very, very still. The rafters were covered in cobwebs and home to thousands of spider species. A million moths flew around the large lantern and illuminated the department like a fluttering chandelier. You should get into book narration. You have a great voice for it. Thank you so much, Courtney. That's very sweet. If I ever run into someone who's a book narrating manager, I'll definitely take it into consideration. In the middle of the department, a massive magnifying glass was used at the table, and Dr. Sting invited the fairies and the witches to pull up a chair. Most people are creeped out by insects, but they're essential to our survival, Dr. Sting said. Without bees and butterflies, we'd do nothing to pollinate the plants. Without earthworms and centipedes, there'd be nothing to aerate the soil. And without predators like dragonflies and spiders, the earth would be overrun with pests. Oh, no, Amy and Tina are fighting again. Hang on, excuse me. The alchemist quickly scooped up a queen ant and a queen termite that had escaped their colonies. Do all your bugs have names? Tangerina asked. Mm-hmm. Every single one, Dr. Sting was proud to report. And they all have different hobbies and personalities, too. The alchemist retrieved a handful of bugs from the canvas and held them beneath a giant magnifying glass for the girls to see. This is Lori the ladybug. She loves romance novels. This is Gary the grasshopper. He's obsessed with gambling. And Betty, the dung beetle, she has raging OCD. This is Derek, the daddy longlegs. He's an excellent tap dancer. And this over here is Mandy the mantis. She's very conservative, so please don't mention politics around her. Smack! Emeralda suddenly snapped and slapped a mosquito that had landed on the side of her neck. Dr. Sting's eyes went wide with horror. That was Mitchell, he exclaimed. He was almost finished with medical school. Oops, Emeralda said and wiped his remains onto her pants. Sorry, Mitchell. After the fairies and the witches were kicked out of the entomology department, Dr. Stagg escorted them to zoology. The department was a gigantic aviary, not just for birds, but every animal the girls had ever heard of. Eagles soared above the artificial trees. Monkeys swung on artificial vines. Yeah, R.I.P. Mitchell, big time. But, I mean, to be fair, maybe he shouldn't have tried to bite her in the middle of a tour. I don't know. If you're smart enough to go to medical school, you're smart enough to know better than that. Lions prowled through artificial fields and elephants bathed themselves in artificial streams. There were also enormous aquariums that were big enough to hold a blue whale and a gigantic squid. The natural enemies exchanged dirty looks from opposite sides of the department. Yeah, I don't like to victim blame, but like in this case, he's a mosquito, so I don't know. The department was also home to the animals the girls didn't recognize. They saw a wolf walking upright like a human, a dolphin running on 4 legs as it chased after a stick, and a tiger with opposable thumbs that slowly, very slowly, climbed a tree. While we take great pride in studying pre-existing species, magic has allowed us to create hybrid species of our own, Dr. Stagg said. Here we have a bear wolf, and over there is a dogfin, and this here's a slothgur. A slothgur? Stitches asked. Yes, he's very dangerous, but too lazy to care about it, Dr. Stagg said. How do you prevent the animals from preying on one another? Bristol asked. Oh, that's simple. We just keep the animals fed and they don't attack. Funny. We do the same thing with Lucy, Tangerina quipped. Hey, Lucy said. And when the girls were finished looking around the zoology department, Dr. Stump led them up the path to a massive 5-story greenhouse. The botany department contained every plant imaginable, from vegetables that Bristol used to grow in her family's garden to the snapping Venus flytraps that the fairies had seen in the greenhouse canyon. The magbots watered and pruned the plants, but strangely they also played pianos, violins, and tubas for the plants too. Why are the magbots playing instruments? Bristol asked. We've discovered that plants grow quicker and stronger when they're exposed to classical music, Dr. Stump explained. In the corner of the greenhouse, one of the magbots stood on a small stage reciting jokes through a bullhorn. Knock, knock, he said in a lifeless and monotone voice. Who's there? The other magbots responded. A little orchid. A little orchid. Who? I had no idea that you could yodel. Ha ha, ha ha. The Magbot's lifeless laughter echoed through the greenhouse, and the fairies and witches winced at the terrible pun. What's up with the bad jokes? We've also discovered that plants thrive on bad stand-up comedy, Dr. Stump explained. That explains Mrs. V's healthy vegetable garden, Emeralda said, and the fairies and witches left the botany department as quickly as they could. Dr. Stent escorted them to a 9-story building that was shaped like a person. The path spiraled around the physiology department as they entered it from the top of the building, or rather, through its mouth. Once they were inside, the fairies and the witches were shocked to see the interior of the department was an anatomically correct replica of the human body. They boarded a small boat that sailed down the body's throat through its digestive system like a piece of food, and as they floated through to the department, Dr. Stent pointed out the different body parts around them. Well, here we have the gallbladder, and just above us there is the liver, behind us the kidneys, and ahead is the pancreas, Dr. Stent said. Each body part is actually a room dedicated to studying that particular organ, muscle, or gland. Now, everyone please hang on. I know, this part reminds me so much of the Magic School Bus. I loved that episode when I was a kid. And I don't know if any of you have ever been to a thing like this, but when that episode came out, we were living in Washington, and there was a kids museum near where we lived, that the door to the museum was a mouth, and you entered, and like there was a little river where there were little floating blood cells. It was so cool. It was really neat. You got to go through the human body, and I was like, I'm on the Magic School Bus. I thought it was so cool. We're about to enter the large intestine. It's a windy ride. I can't wait to see how this ride ends, if you know what I mean, Stitches said with an eager grin. Please let it be a gift shop, Tangerina whispered to the others. And as they continued their tour of the Alchemy Institute, the fairies and witches found each department more and more wondrous than the last. You've been to that museum, Jen? I was starting to think that I imagined it because no one in my life remembers going there. But there's like a door that the adults can enter, and then there's a mouth that the kids can climb through. It was so cool. The meteorology department was located in a tower with thermometers built into every door and a roof shaped like a massive umbrella. A different type of storm was contained in each of the tower's floors. The Magbots monitored the weather patterns, and the poor robots were tossed around by the powerful tornadoes and drenched by tropical hurricanes. They were even frozen by icy blizzards and electrocuted by lightning. You went with your cousins? Okay, so it's real. That's great to know. Inside the mathematics department, dozens of Magbots sat at desks doing complicated equations by hand and swiping beads on counting frames. The walls were made of chalkboards, and every inch of them was covered by endless equations that Dr. Stats referred to as pi, P-I. The equation started as 3.14159265 and continued for thousands and thousands of digits. A floating piece of chalk kept adding numbers to the end, and as the equation grew, the chalkboard's walls magically grew with it. I can't believe she's still asleep. Can you guys believe this? Like, what is going on right now? The anthropology department was an enormous cave that was covered in handprints and artwork from ancient times. The department also displayed several fossils that had been magically reanimated. Talking skulls told Magbots everything about when and where they came from. Trilobites struggled to free themselves from the stones that they were trapped in, and prehistoric tools rebuilt prehistoric structures from rubble. Skeletons of cavemen battled skeletons of dinosaurs and woolly mammoths while the Magbots took notes on their interactions. The geography department was laid out like a formal ballroom. It had curtains made from maps and flags, and glimmering chandeliers made from large compasses, and a grand staircase made from stacks of atlases. A beautiful silver globe was positioned in the center of the department, and as different locations were pinned with a magical pin, the spacious floor rose and sunk to create a miniature model of different locations' terrains. However, the most astonishing part of the tour was what the fairies and witches learned in the astrology department. The department was under a humongous dome and equipped with 6-story golden telescope. Magic holograms of distant planets, stars, and galaxies drifted through the air all around them. The holograms were so realistic that the girls used each other as shields to protect themselves from unexpected comets and meteor showers. There are 8 planets orbiting our star, over 100,000 million stars in the galaxy, and an estimated 100 billion galaxies in our universe, Dr. Starr enthusiastically told the girls. That means there could be more than 700 quintillion planets out there, and some of them could be just like our own. Are you saying that there could be life on other planets? Emerald asked. Well, not just life, Dr. Starr said. Although we can't prove it, evidence suggests that there are an infinite number of multiverses and dimensions too. The idea gave Bristol goosebumps, but she wasn't altogether surprised. It reminded her of the visit to the gray field between life and the great unknown. Even a number in the quintillions seemed too small to describe all the planets, stars, and galaxies that she had seen there. There were too many for one universe to hold. Wow, other dimensions, she said to herself. Now that's something I'd love to see. After astronomy, Dr. Stone took them to the geology department, and unfortunately this was the final stop on their tour and the most disappointing. The geology department was a narrow room with a couple of piles of rocks, and only a couple piles of rocks. Wow, this is underwhelming, Lucy said. Is something gonna happen? Tangerina asked. Not all science can be entertaining, Dr. Stone said. In fact, some might say geology is between a rock and a hard place. And then the alchemist slapped his knee and howled with laughter. Get it? Because geology is literally between a rock and a hard place? The fairies and the witches collectively sighed at this very bad joke. And I thought the rocks were a tough crowd, Dr. Stone said, and he laughed again. Are you sure botany isn't your calling? Emeralda asked. But thankfully, the fairies and witches were saved from the alchemist's questionable humor when a chime rang through the entire institute. The fairies and witches didn't know what the chime meant, but all the alchemists went outside. Everyone looked toward the front of the institute, and in the distance they could see more floating carriages were approaching the institute. Jillian, I don't know if you know this, but my husband would definitely agree with you because at work, he has to draw rocks all the time. That's like one of his main jobs at work, is drawing rocks. Is that funny or what? Well, I guess, yeah, even now. I was going to say in previous work. But, so every time we go somewhere with nice rocks, he's always taking pictures of them. Yeah, he draws a lot of rocks. A lot of rocks. It's very funny. Splendid, Dr. States said. The other representatives are starting to arrive. Ladies, please excuse us while we go greet our guests. Dr. Stone, would you kindly escort the fairies and the witches to the conference chambers? We'll begin the Conference of Kings once everyone is here. Dr. States and the alchemists headed for the landing strip, and Dr. Stone led the girls toward the center of the campus. As they walked, Lucy pulled Bristol aside for a private word. So, what do you think? Is this a temple of knowledge? I'm not sure, Bristol whispered back. On the one hand, there's certainly a lot of knowledge here, but on the other hand, it doesn't really fit the other parts of the legend. There are no unlikely warriors protecting it, and all the departments were pretty easy to get into. Maybe the legend is false advertising to keep people away. I guess that's possible. If everything goes well at the conference, I'm going to ask Dr. Straight if she's ever heard of the Temple of Knowledge before. You think she's going to give you an honest answer? Probably not, but I can usually tell when someone's lying to me. If she doesn't give us the information voluntarily, we'll just have to sneak into the geography department after the conference and find it for ourselves. While the fairies and the witches made their way to the conference chambers, the floating carriages started to land, and the emerging passengers caught the girls' attention. The first to arrive was King White from the Northern Kingdom. The fairies instantly recognized him from his black hair and his rugged good looks. Even though King White had been on the throne for more than 2 years, he still chose to wear the uniform of a knight. The next arrival was King Warworth from the Western Kingdom. An obnoxiously feathered hat covered his bald head, and a mustache had become so bushy it covered his mouth. Both King White and King Warworth brought 2 armed knights as their guests. They were followed by Queen Industria from the Eastern Kingdom. The elderly queen wore a gown made from metallic fabric, a tribute to her kingdom's most prized export, and her white hair was styled underneath a silver headdress that resembled the jaws of a wrench. Her face was pale and wrinkled as she walked slowly with the help of a cane. Queen Industria had brought a knight and her granddaughter, Princess Proxima, as her guests. The princess wore a dress and a hairstyle very similar to her grandmother's. Even though they were several decades between them, they shared a very strong family resemblance. Wait, he was White Knight? Yeah, he was the White Knight. Isn't that funny? King White was the White Knight before he became king. It's kind of cute, right? The fourth arrival was the Goblin Elder, leader of the Goblin territory. Goblins were known for their glossy green skin, pointed ears, and sharp nails. The Goblin Elder was no exception. He traveled with 2 Goblin warriors, 1 male and 1 female, and the female Goblin was about 7 feet tall and very muscular. She had messy pink hair and wore armor and breastplates made from hubcaps. She carried a very tall staff. Shortly after the goblins arrived, the fifth carriage touched down, and the troll chief stepped outside. The leader of the troll territory also traveled with 2 guards for his protection. The trolls were harder to tell apart than the goblins. All 3 of them were short and hairy, with big noses, big teeth, big feet, and tiny horns. The 6th carriage arrived at the institute, and King Elvin, the leader of the elf territory, emerged. Unlike the other elves, who were traditionally small and slender, the royal family were tall and broad-shouldered. The king had long dark hair, and he wore a crown made from tree branch and black and white checkered suit. Unfortunately, the elves were infamous for their poor tailoring, and the king's sleeves and pant legs were asymmetrical. That's really funny, considering the last fairy book we read had a fairy who was all about hemming things properly. Very funny. King Elvin only traveled with 1 guest, his eldest son, Prince Elrond. The prince was the spitting image of his father, but wore a much smaller crown made from sticks. Next, the fairies were thrilled to see that Emeralda's adoptive father, Mr. Slate, had been chosen to represent the dwarves. He arrived in the 7th carriage, and 2 dwarves from his mine were with him. They all looked like they had just gotten off work because they were covered in dirt, and they wielded 3 pickaxes. The 8th carriage landed immediately after the dwarves and brought a single ogre to the institute. The ogre barely fit inside the coach and had trouble squeezing through the door. He was about 9 feet tall and had brown, bumpy skin. His large nose was pierced with a bone, and the ogre was the only representative the fairies had never met before. He seemed just as confused as they were about why he was there. Just like the fairies and the witches, all the representatives were speechless as they took in their first sight of the Alchemy Institute. They stood motionless, their eyes darting from department to department, and they didn't even notice their peers standing beside them. Bristol was relieved to see all the leaders together, although they had had their differences in the past, especially the trolls and the goblins. The fairies were on good terms with the representatives. In fact, Bristol was the reason the elves, trolls, goblins, and dwarves even had territories to call their own. She was confident that the Conference of Kings would go smoothly, and they'd find a conclusion that wouldn't put Xanthos' life in jeopardy. Unfortunately, Bristol quickly realized her relief was premature when a 9th carriage appeared in the sky. The carriage landed on the strip beside the others, and the door was kicked open before the vehicle came to a complete stop. To the fairies' and witches' dismay, the righteous emperor stepped out and joined by his high commander and the largest skeleton from the army of the dead. Ah, crap, what's he doing here? Lucy shouted. He was invited, just like the rest of you, Dr. Stone told them. How could you invite him? Emeralda asked. He's a monster. Regardless of his cruel tactics, the righteous emperor is still the leader of the South, Dr. Stone said. The main objective of the Conference of Kings is diplomacy, and it wouldn't be very diplomatic to exclude someone just because we disagree with them. Unlike the other leaders, Seven gazed at the Institute the same way he looked at everything, as if it were something to conquer. Just the sight of his smug face was enough to make Bristol's blood boil. I have a feeling this conference is going to be anything but diplomatic, she said. I can't believe this baby is still asleep. It's crazy, right? But we got through 2 chapters peacefully. No wake-ups. What a joy. Tomorrow's chapter 8. Conference of Kings. I don't see it going well. 7's an ass. Sorry to say. Tomorrow we may only be able to read 1 chapter, just a heads up, because baby girl has her first dentist appointment at 10:15. So we'll read a little bit and then I'll get her up and feed her breakfast and take her to her appointment. But we still have time to read a little bit, so it'll be great. 1 chapter's still good. So that is the whole kit and caboodle. To my friends who are getting their HMP mystery boxes today, please do unboxings. I live for those unboxings, please. I want to see what you got. Thank you all for joining me, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. I don't know why I'm doing this with my face. It's probably not good. I'm probably gonna get wrinkles. Have a great day, guys.